It was a Tuesday morning, one of those crisp autumn days when the sun cuts through the cold like a knife. I remember it clearly because everything felt too damn perfect. Rachel had just left for work, and I stood there, leaning against the kitchen counter, coffee mug in hand, thinking about how good things were. Or so I thought. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It wasn't unusual for me to get notifications early in the day, but this one made me pause. It was a message from an unknown number. "I think you deserve to know what Rachel's been up to." My pulse quickened. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't reply right away, but I also couldn't ignore it. Curiosity, suspicion, and maybe a little bit of dread mingled in my chest. After a minute, I opened the message fully, revealing a photo attached. It was Rachel, but not the Rachel I knew. She was sitting in a dimly lit bar, leaning way too close to a guy I didn't recognize. They weren't just talking. His hand was casually draped over her thigh like he had every right to be there. Her smile wasn't the same one I'd seen 1,000 times. It was something more, something I'd never seen her give me. My hands were shaking now. I couldn't look away from the image. Felt like someone had hit me in the gut with a sledgehammer. This was no innocent misunderstanding. This was a betrayal. A perfect, neatly wrapped bomb, dropped into my lap. I wanted to believe it was a joke, some cruel prank. But I knew better. Deep down, I had sensed something was off for weeks. The late-night work trips. Her phone glued to her hand. The excuses that always came just a little too quickly. I had ignored it, telling myself it was nothing. But this photo, it ripped the veil right off. I needed more. I wasn't about to confront her with just one photo. No, I had to be sure. I had to be smart. So, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day digging, going places in my mind I didn't want to go. I pulled up her social media, dug through emails, looked at her credit card statements, anything I could think of. Each piece I found just added fuel to the fire. And then I hit the jackpot. A hotel receipt from the previous weekend. A hotel she definitely hadn't mentioned. And sure enough, the guy's name was right there on the bill. It was like a slow-motion train wreck. Every detail of her double life unfolding before me. But I couldn't stop staring. Couldn't stop torturing myself with each new revelation. By the time she got home that evening, my mind was spinning. But I didn't let on. No, I played it cool. I acted like nothing had changed. Kissed her on the cheek when she walked in. Asked her how her day was. She smiled at me. Gave me the same rehearsed lines I had heard 1,000 times before. And the worst part? She was so good at it. So *****ing convincing. But the game was on now. I wasn't going to explode, not yet. No, I was going to play my part perfectly until the moment was right. Let her dig her grave even deeper. The next few days were a blur of calculated moves. I watched her closely, but didn't make a single misstep. Every smile I gave her, every casual conversation we had, was laced with my anger, my hurt, but I didn't let her see it. I couldn't afford to tip her off. I needed more. Her patterns became predictable. She'd slip into the bedroom, tired from work, and spend extra time in there, always with her phone in hand. If I walked in, she'd quickly switch screens or casually lock it, flashing me that fake smile. The one that used to melt me. Now it just made me sick. I started testing her, seeing just how far her lies would go. One night, I told her I'd be working late myself. Made up some excuse about a project that needed my attention. She barely reacted, just a simple, "Oh, okay. Babe, good luck." As if she was relieved I wouldn't be home. But here's the thing. I wasn't working. I drove halfway across town, parked my car, and sat there in the dark, waiting. I kept checking my phone, nervous, wondering if she was already planning something behind my back. Then, around 9 p.m., I got the message I had been expecting for days. Heading to bed early, sweet dreams. Yeah, right. I raced back home, heart pounding in my chest. My plan was simple. I wasn't gonna burst in and catch her in the act. No, I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. So, I parked 2 blocks away, came in through the side gate, and made my way to the guest house, where I had set up an old phone as a security camera just a few days before. A desperate move, maybe, but I was beyond caring. Through the tiny screen, I watched as Rachel strolled into our bedroom, calm, relaxed, as if nothing in the world could touch her. And then it happened. 15 minutes after her goodnight text, I watched as she slipped into her sexiest black dress, the one she'd worn on our anniversary years ago, and headed out the door without a second thought. My stomach dropped. There it was. No more speculation, no more hoping I was wrong. It was real. Every betrayal, every late-night work meeting, every excuse. It all came crashing down in that moment. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I decided I'd follow her this time. I tailed her carefully, keeping distance but never losing sight. She drove across town and, sure enough, pulled into a small boutique hotel, the same one from the receipt. My blood was boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. There'd be no point in rushing in now. I needed more than just my gut feeling. I needed undeniable proof that would blow her entire web of lies apart. So I waited, watching as she greeted him in the lobby like they were an old couple. The rage was so strong I could taste it, but I stayed glued to my seat. This wasn't the time to act. That moment was coming soon, though. Very soon. And just like that, I had my proof. I took out my phone and started recording. The way they touched each other, the way her face lit up in his presence. It was like watching someone else. Not the woman I married, not the Rachel I had given my life to. But I held onto that anger like a weapon, knowing I'd soon turn it against her. The drive back home was silent. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't punch the steering wheel. I just planned. Every step, every word I'd say to her when the time came. And it would be glorious. She had no idea what was waiting for her. I knew I couldn't keep playing this charade forever. The truth was heavy, like a bomb ticking inside me, and the fuse was running short. Every moment she smiled at me or said, "I love you," was another needle in my chest. But I held on, because I wanted the confrontation to be perfect, explosive, undeniable, and crushing. The day came sooner than I thought. That Saturday morning, Rachel woke up unusually cheerful. She bounced into the kitchen wearing my old hoodie, humming some song she always played when she was in a good mood. The same woman who was slipping out at night, living another life, was standing there like everything was normal. "Hey, babe, let's have a lazy day today," she said, grinning at me over her coffee. "I've been so busy at work. I just want to chill with you." I stared at her, and for a split second, I almost admired how effortlessly she could lie. But that feeling was quickly replaced by something colder. "Sounds good," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let me just finish up some things first." I headed to the bedroom, pretending to grab my laptop, but in reality, I was setting everything in motion. My heart was pounding in my chest, not from fear but from the anticipation of what was about to happen. I scrolled through the video on my phone one last time, making sure the angles were clear, the audio perfect. Then I smiled to myself. This was it. When I returned to the living room, Rachel was already sprawled out on the couch, flipping through TV channels, acting like the perfect wife. I sat down beside her, my hands almost trembling with the excitement of what was coming. "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something." I started, my tone casual. She looked up, a bit distracted, but smiled, completely oblivious. "Sure, what's up?" I locked eyes with her, and I could see the exact moment when she sensed something was off. Her smile faltered just a little, but she recovered quickly. "You've been working really hard lately, haven't you?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah, it's been crazy," she replied, relaxing a bit. "But things are finally calming down. That promotion was a big deal, you know. It's taken up a lot of my time." I nodded slowly, then pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling for a second before I looked her dead in the eyes. The air between us thickened. "Funny thing about that, I actually wanted to congratulate you on your promotion again," I said, my voice low but steady. She smiled, clearly relieved that the conversation seemed to be going somewhere pleasant. "Ah, thanks babe. I know it's been." "Then I figured we could watch something together," I interrupted, turning the phone screen toward her. "Like say this." The second her eyes locked onto the screen, her face drained of color. I watched her as the video played, the hotel lobby, the way she hugged him, the way they kissed like no one in the world mattered but them. Her eyes went wide, mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. She froze, completely blindsided. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back, letting the silence suffocate her. Explain, I asked, almost amused. Please, Rachel, I'm all ears. She fumbled, reaching for some excuse, but the words were failing her. Her confident, composed self had shattered in an instant. Now she was just scrambling, panicking like a cornered animal. It's not what it looks like, she started, but I cut her off with a cold laugh. It's not what it looks like? I repeated, my voice rising. You're telling me it's not you sneaking out to some hotel with him? It's not you kissing another man when you're supposed to be at work meetings? I have the *****ing video. Rachel, what are you going to say next? That it's just a misunderstanding. She blinked, still struggling to find her footing, but I didn't let her. I leaned forward, close enough to see the panic in her eyes, and whispered, let's see how you explain this in court. Her face twisted, and suddenly, like a switch had flipped, she stopped pretending. The soft, panicked tone disappeared, and her eyes narrowed. So what? She snapped, her voice sharp now. You think you can just throw this in my face and I'll beg for forgiveness? You've been so and clueless for months, and now you're the victim? Please. I froze for a second, taken aback by her sudden change in attitude. It wasn't fear or guilt anymore, it was anger. Pure, ugly anger. Don't act like you didn't push me to this, she continued, standing up and tossing the hoodie on the couch. You've been checked out for ages. Always at work, always distracted. I needed someone, and guess what? I found him. It was like watching a mask fall off, revealing the person I never wanted to see. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't sorry. She was trying to justify it, to turn the blame on me, as if this was my fault. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. She shrugged, like she didn't care anymore. Believe what you want, but I'm not the one who killed this marriage, you did. I stood there, stunned. She wasn't just a liar. She was twisting the knife. But what she didn't realize was that this was exactly what I needed. Her true self, her real, unfiltered self, was all the proof I needed to finally walk away from this disaster. And I was ready. Her words hung in the air like poison, seeping into every corner of my mind. You killed this marriage. It was almost laughable. I stood there, barely able to recognize the woman spitting venom in front of me. There was no remorse, no regret, just a twisted attempt to justify her betrayal. But in that moment, something clicked inside me. Any trace of doubt or confusion I had was gone. This was war now. I sat back down on the couch, trying to contain the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't let her see how much she'd gotten to me. Not yet. She was pacing, crossing her arms, throwing out lines like, "You were never home," or "You didn't care about me," as if those were reasons to rip apart what we had built. But I stayed calm, cold even. "So that's it, huh?" I said, finally breaking the silence. "This whole time, you've been lying to my face, sneaking around, and now you want to blame me for it?" She shot me a look that was somewhere between frustration and disgust. "It's not just about sneaking around. You don't get it. You stopped paying attention to me, stopped being there for me. What did you expect? For me to just sit around and wait for you to notice? I'm not some *****ng trophy on a shelf." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "So you thought sleeping with another guy would fix that? That's your answer?" Rachel rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, leaning against the wall as if the conversation bored her. "You think it's all about that, don't you? Like everything would have been fine if I hadn't cheated." I interrupted, my voice sharp now. "Don't sugarcoat it, Rachel. You didn't find someone. You didn't need someone. You cheated. Just call it what it is." She flinched for a split second, but then her expression hardened. She wasn't going to back down. "Yeah, I cheated. Fine. But you pushed me to it. You think I wanted to find someone else? No. But I didn't have a choice." I stood up now, my heart pounding as the anger surged through me. "No choice? You're standing there, blaming me for the fact that you couldn't keep your legs closed? That's rich, Rachel." She glared at me, but I wasn't done. "I was there for you, every damn day. I supported your career, your dreams, and this is how you pay me back? By screwing some guy in a hotel room and blaming it on me?" Her face twisted with frustration, but the fire in her eyes was gone. She could see I wasn't buying her excuses anymore. I was pushing back, and she wasn't prepared for that. "I never asked for this," she snapped. "I didn't want it to get this far, okay? But it happened, and you—" "No, Rachel." I cut her off again, stepping closer to her now. "You chose this. You made the decision to lie, to sneak around, to betray me. Don't you dare stand there and act like you're the victim." She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time in this whole mess, she looked uncertain, like the ground beneath her was finally starting to crack. I pressed on, fueled by the months of suspicion, the weeks of betrayal, the days of planning this moment. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, my voice quieter now but dripping with bitterness. "I trusted you. Even when things felt off, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, that you'd never do this. But I was wrong. You were already gone. I was just too blind to see it." She swallowed hard, her defenses crumbling as she realized she had lost control of the narrative. I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a way out of this. But there was none. "Not anymore. I don't know what you want me to say," she muttered, her voice barely audible now. The confidence, the arrogance, it was all fading. "I'm sorry. Okay? I messed up. But you weren't perfect either." I almost laughed at how pathetic her apology sounded. There was no sincerity in it, just a half-hearted attempt to save face, to salvage whatever tiny shred of power she thought she had left. "I don't want your apology," I said, my voice cold as ice. "Not anymore." I pulled out my phone again and opened the video, the same one that had shattered my world just days before. "I already have everything I need, Rachel. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack your things, and you're going to leave. Today." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "Wait, what? You're kicking me out? Just like that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Just like that." She started to stammer, her voice shaky. "But where am I supposed to go?" I don't care." I cut her off, the finality in my tone unmistakable. "You made your choices, Rachel. Now you live with them." There was a long, tense silence as she stood there, processing what I just said. She looked around the room, as if seeing it for the last time, knowing that everything she had built here was slipping away. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was weighing her options, trying to figure out how to weasel her way out of this. But she couldn't. I watched her crumble, bit by bit, as the reality of the situation finally set in. This was it. She had lost. "Fine," she finally muttered, her voice hollow. "I'll go." Rachel stood there for a moment, frozen, her face a twisted mix of disbelief and anger. I could see her mind racing, trying to grasp how everything had spiraled out of control so fast. It was like the weight of her lies finally crashed down on her. And for the first time, she realized there was no talking her way out of this. No more excuses, no more manipulation, just consequences. She looked at me, her eyes flickering with desperation, but I wasn't backing down. "Not anymore." "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling, but with an edge of defiance, like she still thought she could salvage some power in this. "You're really kicking me out? After everything we've been through?" I stared at her, almost in disbelief at her audacity. "After everything we've been through? You did this, Rachel. You burned everything we had to the ground. You don't get to play the victim now." She flinched, but she wasn't done. "And what, you're just going to throw me out? Like I meant nothing?" I could feel the anger rising again, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let her drag me into another pointless argument. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She was cornered, and she knew it. But then, as if grasping at straws, she changed tactics. Her face softened, and she took a step toward me, her voice suddenly gentler. "Look, I know I screwed up," she said, her tone almost pleading now. "But can't we just talk about this? We've been together for so long. Doesn't that count for something? I made a mistake. Yes, but we can fix this." I could see the shift in her eyes. This wasn't an apology. It was another move in her game, a last-ditch effort to manipulate me. She thought if she played the emotional card, I'd fold. That I'd fall back into old habits, the same way I had when I'd ignored all the signs. But not this time. I shook my head, the words coming out steady. Final. No, Rachel. We can't fix this. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice over and over again. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and you tried to pin it on me when you got caught. That's not something we come back from. Her eyes filled with something between shock and disbelief, like she hadn't expected me to be so firm. She blinked, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the comfort, the security, the life we'd built. But where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice cracking a little. You can't just throw me out like this. I need time. Time, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. You had all the time in the world to come clean, to be honest. But you didn't. You used that time to lie, to sneak around. So no, Rachel, you don't get more time. Pack your things. You can stay with him for all I care. The mention of him sent a ripple of discomfort across her face, but she quickly masked it. She opened her mouth to say something, maybe another excuse, but I was done listening. I turned away from her, pulling out my phone and scrolling through contacts. What are you doing? She asked, her voice sharp with panic. Calling a locksmith, I said calmly. You have 2 hours to pack. After that, the locks are getting changed. Are you serious? She almost laughed, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're actually doing this? After all these years? I glanced at her, the coldness in my voice shocking even to me. Yes, I'm actually doing this. For a moment, she stood there, speechless, realizing there was nothing left to say. The room felt heavier, like the walls themselves were pressing in on her. She gave one last exasperated sigh, then stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was suffocating, but in a strange way, it felt like a relief. I had been trapped in this mess for months, maybe longer, and now it was finally coming to an end. But that didn't make it hurt any less. I stood there, staring at the empty living room, my mind racing with everything that had happened. How the hell had it come to this? I'd always heard stories about infidelity, about people discovering the person they loved was living a double life. But those stories were just that, distant, far away, things that happened to other people. Not me, never me. Yet here I was, standing in the ruins of my marriage, wondering how I'd missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind for so long. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that everything I thought we had, everything I had trusted, had been a lie. How do you even begin to move on from that? But as the minutes passed, the anger that had been burning in me slowly shifted into something else, something colder, something more determined. I wasn't going to let her break me, not like this. An hour later, Rachel emerged from the bedroom, her eyes red but her face hardened. She had a couple of bags packed, and for the first time she looked small, vulnerable almost. But I didn't let that get to me. I wasn't going to fall for the act again. Is this what you really want? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no fight left in her. I nodded. Yes. She stood there for a long moment, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. After a few seconds, she sighed, grabbed her bags, and walked toward the door. Before she stepped out, she paused and looked back at me, her eyes searching for something. Forgiveness? Regret? I wasn't sure, but she wouldn't find any of that here. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. And with that, she walked out, the door closing behind her with a soft click that felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. As the silence settled in, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over, finally over. But even as the relief washed over me, the emptiness followed right behind it. The house, once filled with memories, now felt cold, hollow, like the echoes of what had been lost were still bouncing off the walls. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done living in her lies. The house felt eerily quiet after she left. It was the kind of silence that creeps up on you, that presses against your chest and makes the air feel heavier. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the door, half expecting Rachel to burst back in with some last-ditch plea, but she didn't. The emptiness settled in like a fog. I walked through the house slowly, the weight of the past few weeks sinking in deeper with every step. It was strange seeing our home, no, my home now, like this. So many things had her fingerprints on them. The bookshelves she'd organized, the paintings she'd picked out, even the kitchen, with the stupid little live, laugh, love sign she insisted on hanging up. Everything felt stained with memories, and for a brief moment, I wondered how I was ever going to shake it all off. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, leaving behind this hollow feeling in my chest. It was like the aftermath of a storm, calm, but with debris everywhere. My mind kept replaying the scene, her face when she realized I had caught her, the way she tried to twist everything back onto me. But there was no point in revisiting it. It was done. The damage had been done long before today. I sat down on the couch, staring at nothing in particular. Part of me still couldn't fully wrap my head around it. 12 years of marriage just gone. Broken, not by a single moment, but by 1,000 little decisions she made along the way. I always thought we were stronger than that, but now it all felt so fragile, like the life I thought we had was made of glass and I'd been too blind to see the cracks. And the worst part? I didn't feel as angry as I thought I would. The rage I'd felt earlier, the boiling need for confrontation, had faded, leaving behind a kind of dull, aching sadness. I wasn't just mad at her. I was mad at myself. How did I miss it? How did I let it get this far? I wasn't naive enough to believe our marriage had been perfect. Nobody's is. We'd had our rough patches, sure, but nothing that couldn't be fixed, or so I thought. But Rachel's betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a reminder that all the little things I'd dismissed, all the times I'd brushed off my gut feelings, had been warning signs, and I ignored them. I couldn't help but go back in my head, analyzing everything. Every late-night phone call, every mysterious text she'd laughed off, all the times she'd come home with some excuse that sounded just a little too rehearsed. I'd convinced myself she was just busy, that the stress of her job was to blame for her distance. I'd trusted her completely, and she had shattered that trust, stomped on it without a second thought. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. The irony of it all hit me. I had spent weeks preparing for that confrontation, gathering every shred of evidence, watching her moves like a detective solving a case. But in the end, none of that mattered. She had shown her true colors in those final moments. Cold, unapologetic, blaming me as if she hadn't orchestrated this entire collapse. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages, almost on autopilot. The video was still there, the one that had changed everything. I watched it again, not because I needed to, God knows I had seen enough, but because I wanted to remind myself that this wasn't just in my head. I hadn't imagined her betrayal. There it was in high definition, her with him, laughing, touching, sharing something I had no part in. And yet, even as I stared at it, I couldn't help but wonder, was there something I could have done differently? Could I have saved us if I had noticed earlier? If I had confronted her before she slipped away completely? I hated that part of me was still looking for answers, still trying to find meaning in the wreckage. But the truth was clear now. There was no saving what we had. Maybe there hadn't been for a long time, and I was just too blind to see it. I put the phone down and looked around the living room. Everything seemed the same, but nothing felt the same. This was no longer the place where we shared lazy Sundays, where we argued about dinner plans, or where we laughed at stupid TV shows together. This house was a reminder of what we had, and what I had lost. And it was filled with ghosts. Memories of Rachel that would haunt me if I let them. I stood up, pacing the room, the weight of it all crushing me. I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay here, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was now tainted. But I also wasn't ready to let go of everything. Not yet. Moving on didn't feel real yet. I had spent so long thinking about her betrayal, planning my next move, that now, without the constant buzz of rage, I didn't know what to do with myself. As the hours passed, I made a list in my head. The practical things, the divorce, splitting assets, how to tell friends and family. But the emotional part, that felt impossible to navigate right now. One thing was for sure, though. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. Finally, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I needed air. I needed to think. The house was suffocating, and if I stayed here any longer, I'd drown in the memories. I stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting me like a slap in the face. Felt good, grounding. As I walked down the street, the world felt strange, almost surreal. Couples strolled past me, laughing, talking, living lives I no longer recognized. I was on the other side now, one of the broken ones. A guy whose wife had cheated, whose marriage was dead, who had to start over from scratch. But as I kept walking, something inside me shifted. Maybe it wasn't real acceptance, not yet, but it was close. This was my new reality, and I had to face it. No more looking back, no more hoping for something that was never going to happen. Rachel was gone, and with her, the future I thought we'd have. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the end of the world after all. The cold night air seemed to strip away the weight I'd been carrying. Each step felt like I was walking further from the wreckage of my life, though I knew there was no escaping it entirely. The divorce, the endless questions from friends and family, the stares from people who would whisper behind my back. It was all waiting for me. But for now, out here in the open, there was a strange kind of peace. I found myself wandering without a destination. My mind was a mess, replaying the past few months on a loop, but I kept moving forward. That's what I needed to do now. Keep moving forward, even if it felt like I was walking through a minefield. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed. For a second, my heart jumped. Some stupid instinct that made me think it might be Rachel. But when I checked, it was just a message from Tyler, my best friend. The same Tyler who had noticed something was off with Rachel before I did. "Hey man, haven't heard from you in a while. Let's grab a drink." Tyler had always been blunt. He wasn't the type to dance around things. I figured he must have sensed that something had happened. He probably didn't know the details yet, but he wasn't an idiot. I thought about ignoring it, not ready to face the questions, the pity, the inevitable conversation about what had gone wrong. But then again, I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts either. So I replied, "Sure, meet you at Murphy's in 20. Murphy's was our usual spot, a quiet bar on the edge of town where the bartenders knew our names, and the drinks were always strong enough to drown out whatever was weighing us down. Felt right to go there tonight. When I arrived, Tyler was already at the bar, nursing a whiskey. He looked up as I walked in, his usual grin quickly fading when he saw the look on my face. I sat down next to him, not saying a word as the bartender slid a beer in front of me. I took a long drink, feeling the cold liquid rush through me, calming the storm inside. "So," Tyler finally said, glancing at me from the corner of his eye, "what's going on? You look like you've been through hell." I let out a dry laugh. "You have no idea." He turned fully toward me now, his expression serious. "Talk to me, man. What happened?" I stared down at my drink, swirling it around, trying to find the right words. But there was no easy way to say it. "Rachel cheated. For months." Tyler's eyes widened, and for a second, he looked like he might say something. But instead, he just sat there, listening, waiting. I didn't hold back. I told him everything. The late-night work meetings, the lies, the hotel, the video, the confrontation. Each detail spilled out like a confession. And the more I talked, the more real it all felt. Like saying it out loud was the final step in accepting that my marriage was over. When I was done, Tyler sat back, shaking his head slowly. "Damn, I had a feeling something was off, but I didn't think she'd actually." "Yeah," I muttered, taking another long sip. "Neither did I." There was a long silence, the kind where you know your friend is trying to find the right thing to say but doesn't want to make it worse. Tyler was good like that. He wasn't one for empty platitudes or saying things just to fill the quiet. Finally, he spoke. "So what now? You file for divorce?" I nodded. "Yeah, there's no fixing this." She didn't even try to apologize, really. She just blamed me for everything. Like it was my fault she was screwing around behind my back. Tyler's jaw tightened, and I could see the anger building in him. He was protective like that. Man, what a piece of... I know. I cut him off, not wanting to go down that road again. I'd spent enough time hating her for what she did. I didn't need to keep feeding that fire. But Tyler wasn't letting it go. "She's trying to make you the bad guy? After all that?" "She's good at it," I said bitterly. She flipped the script so fast. It was like she'd been rehearsing for months. Tyler shook his head again, disbelief and anger written all over his face. I I don't get it. Why not just tell you if she was that unhappy? Why blow up your life like that? That's the part one can't wrap my head around either, I admitted. I thought we had problems, sure, but not this. I thought she'd come to me if things were that bad. We sat in silence for a while, both of us lost in our thoughts. I knew Tyler was as baffled as I was, but there wasn't any point in trying to figure out why Rachel had done what she did. People who lie and cheat don't always make sense. And maybe that was the hardest part, accepting that I might never get a real answer. After a while, Tyler leaned forward, his tone softening. You know, it's probably a good thing you found out now. Better than staying in a marriage that was already dead. Yeah, I said, though the words felt hollow. It was true, but it didn't make it any less painful. And don't worry about the divorce stuff, he added. I'll help you with whatever you need. Lawyers, paperwork, splitting the house, whatever. You're not going through this alone. I nodded, grateful for his support, but the truth was the idea of divorce, of untangling our lives from each other, felt overwhelming. Splitting up everything we had built, deciding who got what, navigating the legal mess, it all seemed too much right now. But I knew I had no choice. The process had to start, and I had to face it head-on. We sat there for a long time, the weight of it all slowly settling in. Tyler didn't press me with more questions. Didn't try to push me into some pep talk about moving on or starting over. He knew better. He just sat with me, letting me process things in my own time. Eventually, after a few more drinks, I felt a little lighter, like the pressure inside my chest had eased up just a bit. The world outside didn't seem so suffocating anymore. And for the first time since Rachel walked out the door, I started to see a way through the fog. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen fast, but I knew I could get through it. Tyler was right. This wasn't the end of everything. It was just the end of something that had already been broken for a long time. And maybe, somewhere on the other side of this, there was something better waiting for me. The morning after meeting Tyler, I woke up feeling strangely clear-headed. No fog, no numbness, just an odd sense of calm. It was as if the storm had finally passed. The bed felt too big, too empty, but I was getting used to that now. The weight of the last few weeks was still there, but it didn't suffocate me like before. I got up and wandered into the kitchen. The house was quiet, painfully so. No sounds of Rachel clattering around in the kitchen. No music playing while she made coffee. I stood there for a second, just absorbing the silence, and for the first time, I didn't hate it. With a deep breath, I grabbed my phone and made the call I'd been dreading but knew I had to make. The divorce lawyer. The receptionist transferred me, and I found myself explaining the situation to someone I had never met. She was sympathetic, professional, and promised to schedule a consultation as soon as possible. It felt surreal, setting up a meeting to officially end the life I had built with Rachel, but I knew it was the only way forward. There was no turning back now. Once that was done, I felt a little lighter, like a piece of the puzzle had finally clicked into place. It was happening. The paperwork, the legal stuff, the untying of our lives, it was all beginning. And while it scared me, it also felt freeing. Later that morning, I started sorting through some of the things Rachel had left behind. She hadn't taken everything when she left, just a few bags of clothes, but there were still pieces of her scattered throughout the house. Her shoes lined up by the door, her favorite mug in the kitchen, a few of her books on the shelf. I stood there for a long time, staring at her things, wondering what I should do with them. Part of me wanted to throw it all out, dump it on the lawn, burn it, whatever it took to erase her from this space. But that felt too dramatic, too emotional. I didn't want to give her that kind of power over me anymore. So instead, I packed it all up. One box, neatly folded clothes, carefully stacked books, and a few trinkets she'd collected over the years. I taped the box shut and left it by the front door. She could come pick it up whenever she wanted, but it wouldn't be sitting in the house reminding me of her anymore. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. That afternoon, I called my parents. I hadn't told them yet. In fact, I hadn't told anyone except Tyler. I wasn't ready for the wave of sympathy, the endless questions, the well-meaning advice. But it was time. They had a right to know what was happening. My mom answered on the second ring, her cheerful voice cutting through the silence. "Hey, honey, how's everything going?" I hesitated for a second, the words catching in my throat. "How do you tell your parents that your marriage has imploded?" Not great, actually, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Rachel and I were getting a divorce. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her processing the news. Oh, sweetheart, she said finally, her voice full of concern. I'm so sorry. What happened? I didn't go into all the details. Couldn't. I just told her that things hadn't been working for a while, that Rachel had been unfaithful, and that I was filing for divorce. My mom was shocked, of course, but she didn't press for more. She just listened, her voice soft and comforting, offering to come down and stay with me for a few days. Thanks, Mom, I said, but I think I need some space right now. I'll be okay. I just need to figure things out. I understand, she said, though I could hear the worry in her voice. But promise me you'll call if you need anything. We're here for you, no matter what. I will, I promised, even though I wasn't sure what I would need from anyone right now. Support, maybe, but mostly I just wanted time. Time to process, time to think, time to figure out who I was without Rachel. After I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Telling my parents made it all the more real. The life I'd built with Rachel was officially over, and now I had to start picking up the pieces of whatever came next. The rest of the day passed quietly. I kept myself busy, cleaning, sorting through paperwork, doing anything to keep my mind from wandering back to the past. There were moments when the pain hit me hard, when I remembered something small about her. A laugh, a look, the way she used to make us breakfast on Sundays, and it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But each time, I reminded myself that the woman I was remembering wasn't the woman who had walked out on me. Not anymore. That evening, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom. I looked at my reflection, really looked, for the first time in what felt like forever. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me, the dark circles under my eyes, the tension in my jaw, the way my shoulders slumped like I'd been carrying the weight of the world for too long. I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a long, slow breath. This was it. This was my life now. And as much as it scared me, it also felt like a blank slate. No more lies. No more pretending everything was okay. Just me rebuilding from the ground up. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. There would be more hard days, more moments when I'd miss her, more times when I'd question whether I could really move on. But I also knew that staying stuck in the past, holding on to the pain, wasn't an option. I had to keep going. I had to keep walking forward, even if I wasn't sure where the path would lead. As I turned off the bathroom light and headed to bed, I realized something. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't dreading the morning. I wasn't waking up to the same nightmare over and over. I was waking up to something new, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The next few weeks came and went in waves. Some days I felt like I was finally pulling myself together, making progress. Other days, the weight of it all hit me like a freight train. But I kept moving forward, inch by inch, step by step. It wasn't about trying to forget Rachel, because I couldn't, not yet. But it was about finding out who I was without her, who I wanted to be. The divorce process started slowly, as these things usually do. The paperwork was tedious, the meetings with lawyers even worse. Rachel and I communicated only through email or our attorneys, each exchange feeling colder than the last. She tried to push back on a few things, probably hoping for some kind of leverage, but there wasn't much to fight over. I wanted a clean break, and deep down I think she did too. Surprisingly, it wasn't the legal side that hurt the most. It was the mundane things. The day I had to go to the bank to separate our accounts. The moment I realized I'd have to update my emergency contacts. Taking her name off. Seeing an old picture of us pop up on my phone. A memory from years ago when everything had seemed so solid, so real. But even in those moments, I felt myself growing stronger. It was like shedding old skin, piece by painful piece, until I was someone new underneath. I had been through the worst of it, and now it was about rebuilding. One evening, a couple of weeks after Rachel had left, I found myself sitting outside on the back porch. It was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that I used to take for granted. The stars were out, the air was crisp, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't drowning in my thoughts. I took a deep breath and sipped my beer, letting the calmness of the night settle over me. It wasn't perfect and I wasn't healed, but I was getting there, slowly. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. Rachel's betrayal, as painful and devastating as it was, didn't define me. It didn't get to be the story of my life. I was more than what had happened to me. It wasn't just about surviving the affair or the lies or the divorce. It was about rediscovering who I was without the weight of it all. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of that. The idea of starting over didn't terrify me like it had before. In fact, it felt almost freeing. The next morning, I woke up with that same sense of clarity. The sun streamed through the blinds, and I didn't feel the usual pang of dread. I felt ready. Ready to let go. Ready to move forward. Ready to stop letting Rachel's actions define my every thought. I wasn't pretending that I was completely over it, but I was choosing to stop letting it control me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my messages. I hadn't spoken to many people lately. Tyler had been checking in on me here and there, but I had mostly kept to myself. But today something changed. I shot him a text. "Hey, let's grab that drink again sometime. I'm in a better place now." His response came almost immediately. "Hell yeah, I knew you'd bounce back, man. Let's do it this weekend." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The world outside my little bubble was still there, waiting for me. I had kept myself locked in this emotional prison for long enough, but now it was time to rejoin the living. I spent that day cleaning the house. It wasn't just about tidying up, it was about reclaiming the space, making it mine again. I threw out old things that reminded me of Rachel, packed up the last of her stuff that I'd forgotten to deal with, and rearranged the furniture. It was small, but it felt like a fresh start. Like I was carving out a new chapter for myself, one without her ghost haunting every corner. Later that evening, I took a walk around the neighborhood. It was something I used to do when I needed to clear my head, but I hadn't felt the urge in a long time. The crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I made my way down familiar streets, my thoughts surprisingly light. As I walked, I passed by the little coffee shop Rachel and I used to go to. For a second, a sharp pang of memory hit me, but I pushed through it. That was the past. And right now, I was more interested in the future. I wasn't sure what it held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to face it. A few days later, Tyler and I met up at Murphy's again. But this time, it felt different. The last time I'd been here, I was in pieces, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. But tonight, I felt lighter. More myself. Tyler slapped me on the back as I sat down at the bar. "Man, you're looking better already," he said with a grin. "Told you you'd get through this." I chuckled. "Yeah, I guess you were right." We spent the next few hours talking about anything but the divorce. Old stories, plans for the future, stupid jokes that made us laugh like kids. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Rachel or the affair or the life I thought I'd lost. I was just living, and it felt damn good. As the night wound down, Tyler gave me a knowing look. "So what's next for you, man? You starting to think about getting back out there?" I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. "Maybe, but not yet. I think I need a little more time." He nodded, understanding. "No rush, but when you're ready, you know I'll be there to wingman for you." I laughed, appreciating the offer, even though the idea of dating again seemed distant. For now, I was content with just being on my own, figuring out who I was and what I wanted. There was no rush to dive into something new. As I walked home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The weight of the past was still there, lingering in the background, but it wasn't suffocating me anymore. It wasn't defining every step I took. I was finally starting to see the future again. Something beyond the pain, beyond the betrayal. Something that was mine and mine alone. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I was okay with the unknown. Because this time, I knew that no matter what happened, I could handle it. I could rebuild and I could move forward. Rachel was part of my past, but she didn't get to dictate my future. And as I stood there, looking up at the stars, I realized something simple, yet profound. I was free.